Creating the Perfect Company from the organizational experts, Multiview Incorporated. This content is based on MBI's work with over 1,300 organizations, extracting 989 data elements with 922 cross-calculations over 27 years on a monthly basis, and then systematizing the operational success patterns of the 90th percentile. Our intent is to get beyond the brag and the boast, and simply share insights from our experience without manipulation or coercion to sell anything, except helpful ideas. These messages range from intimate recordings from the Awakened Forest to concerts, national conferences, and broadcasts.
Welcome back, and we will continue our deep dive discussion into compensation, this most important topic, because as I've stated previously, all of life is compensation. It's a push-pull world. It's a electromagnetic world in that there's always two sides of the magnet. There's the positive side, there's the negative side, and both of these we have to look at in terms as incentives. We want to provide disincentives and positives, obviously the incentives, which most of us go to. But again, I'm overemphasizing the negative aspects because it's so powerful, and if someone's only using the positive, they're really only getting half of the results or the performance or the quality, ultimately, or the fulfillment of the mission that they want to get. So let's continue. There are three elements needed in most compensation systems. At least this is what we suggest in the Multiview world. The first is a modest base. This can be either salary or hourly, and it's something that people can count on each pay period. And we found that people kind of need to have, or prefer, I should say, to have something that's guaranteed. Yes, we've had pure activity-based systems and have gotten great results from these systems, but it can make people a little bit neurotic. And as I'm still sitting here on the mountain in nature, looking out over the beauty and splendor of this, we know that we are actually gifted, or there's some defaults already in place that sustain us. Things like air, like a certain temperature range, which our organisms need to live. There's food around. Yes, we have to go out and get it, just like we have to go out and get the water, but that's part of the motivation or inspiration of life. We have to give something to get something. And that's so much of how life operates on this planet. So a modest base, hourly, salary, that folks can count on. But the point is you don't want it to be, I'll say, a comfortable amount, because if it's too comfortable, people will, they'll get slack. They'll get lazy because, hey, I really don't have to extend myself to get my nuts. I can kind of hang back and I'm still going to get my chips. And that's exactly what you don't want to have. In fact, I'll say it like this. You almost want to scale it back to the point where people couldn't really pay all their bills or live in the lifestyle that they've become accustomed to. So a modest base. Okay, the second element that's needed in a strong comp system is that of some standards component. And this basically does your accountability for people just doing their jobs. There's no stretch, there's no goals. It's just doing the job. And you have to carve out a section that we're going to add on top of this modest base for you to deduct pay or to deduct compensation when the standards of the organization, the quality, the performance are not being achieved. Okay, so this is a bucket that you form that you can always dip into, and this creates great flexibility in a compensation system. Because at that point, as you have to evolve your business over time, as nature evolves, it's an evolving pattern. We have to adapt to it, otherwise we die. We become like the other 97% of all species that have existed on this earth that no longer exist. We have to adapt. And by having this bucket in place, the CEO has levers, tools, and buttons that, we need this now. There's a new regulation that we need to respond to. Okay, let's incentivize this. Or it could be, again, the negative. If this is not done, this is what happens. This is the consequence. So we have, again, the modest base. We have the standards component or bucket. And the third thing is a unit-based or productivity-based or performance-based component that enables the individual person to increase or decrease their income by choice. And these are the big three, because most of us get it that when we do something, we get the result or benefit, and that's highly motivational. And we also know, even if we're working on a small team of 8 or 10 people, and let's say the compensation or the incentive is for that group, well, they realize there could be some slackers on that team. And thus, they can help, they can encourage people to be more productive, to have better attitudes, to be better coworkers, but they can't control it. And I think that's the issue with a lot of group or team accountability. We used to do quite a bit of it in the multi-view world. We've went away from it to a certain extent. I mean, you have to do it with shareholders and any type of real ownership stake in the business. But this controllability or this feeling of controllability is a huge thing. And the person knows that at minimum, they can control their own actions, their own behavior, their own results. And so individual or unit-based or productivity-based or performance-based systems, or this component of the compensation system, is highly effective. The other thing that can be woven into the system, either as a separate component or part of standards pay, should be, in our opinion, an attitude or cultural aspect. You might call it attitude pay, because attitude is so important in life. It's so important in our success. We all love to work with people with great attitudes, and we hate working alongside people with crappy attitudes, right? You can lose your top performers because of one bad apple, one distasteful personality in the workforce, because they just make life miserable. And if we want a happy culture, a happy, healthy culture with people with good attitudes, then why not pay for it? Make it a standard. And this can, again, be a separate small slice, or it can be woven into standards pay. And I think that probably the more elegant way of doing this is just to put it in the standards pay bucket, just because it simplifies everything. And yes, you are expected to have a great attitude if you're working for this company. And if you have a crappy attitude or poor attitude, you're going to feel the pain. And we have methods of doing this in a most elegant way. Now, we discussed the 4 elements of a great compensation system. Here are the 4 classifications of compensation. First, there's hourly. That is probably the most elementary way. It's the worst way of paying people. If you're paying people hourly, just realize it's the worst way. Why? It's because it has to do with time, and the job will expand to fill the time allotted. Whereas if you have a productivity-based system, or where a large component of your pay is based on productivity, people will tend to become more efficient and thus get the job done or the results in less time. They won't drag it out. So hourly is the worst way. The next classification is that of salary, and most of us are used to this. This is an established or set amount for a position that people get every pay cycle. And the third element is piecework. And this is really an amount for each unit of work done. So if we're in a factory and we're making buttons, for every button you get X amount. This also, I think, can translate into a lot of sales situations, that for every unit of sales that we make, that we get a small percentage of that. So piecework really is a unit-based approach that has been used for centuries, and it's very much a complete efficiency system. Now, the fourth classification of compensation is really an MBI-ized category, and we'll say performance-based. And to me, this one really has to do with the motivation or the incentivizing of the larger goals, or maybe specific goals or reach, the extension of human potential to achieve some level of attainment. Whether it's doubling the business, whether it's 10xing the business, whether it's achieving a certain level of quality, just like in our world. Again, we measure in healthcare, especially the home care settings, although we've done this for hospital settings as well, is the number of screw-ups or complaints per 1,000. Again, the record right now being 5,553, beating the former record of 4,222. Okay, this means that you're going days, weeks, sometimes even months without a single screw-up or complaint. And that's just almost unheard of in healthcare because it is done so poorly. A lot of times I'm embarrassed to tell folks that we work in healthcare because people have such a dismal experience. But on the other hand, if you're a smart cookie, you realize, if the herd is pretty crappy, if the 50th percentile is pretty crappy, that makes it just that much easier for us to propel ourselves to the red X. That is the 90th percentile on the normally distributed bell curve. We want to be one of those few organizations that actually does it well and creates this customer delight. So your performance-based classification really has to do with the large, overarching goals of the business. And how do you motivate those? Through large bonuses, advancement in status or position. It can be done all kinds of different ways. Now, when you get into compensation methodologies, you have various options. You have, number one, a per unit approach, and we've talked about that some with piecework, where you get paid X amount for each unit of production that you do. The other thing that you might have, and this is the second point here, is minimums, that you have to at least achieve a certain minimum standard of production, performance, quality in order to retain your job or get your compensation. But you also can have, and this is the third point, excellent amounts, that when you exceed a certain threshold or line of demarcation of quality or performance, that you get X pay for doing that. So these excellent amounts. So you have the minimum or the floor, and then you have the ceiling. Really, I shouldn't call it a ceiling. You have this upper threshold that you would want to cross. And then you can also have ranges. This makes levels where employees, you want them to hit these predefined levels of performance. And so that also can be done. So basically, it just has to be within this range. And what makes this unique is that there's several different levels or ranges. So you may have 0 to 5, you get X. From 6 to 10, you get X. From 11 to 15, you get X. So that's more of a leveling type system. And we've seen that employed, and once in a while we'll put those in. Now I'm going to cover some really hardcore structural work that has to be done in implementing a compensation system. And this is going to be done in priority order, because that is so Six Sigma. That's so multi-view. Yes, where we distinguish between higher and lower value things, or the logical sequence, or as I would say with my system analyst background, the critical path. So the first thing is to set the profit standard. Now, for a not-for-profit, it'd be the surplus standard. But one of the biggest mistakes a CEO can make is setting too low of a profit standard. Why? Because if you put this soft, squishy standard out there that's easy to get, well, later on, when you want to take the organization to the next place and you have the compensation system, which people are benefiting from, I mean, they're driving new cars, they have new homes, and suddenly you up the game on them, it does not go well. So the point I'd like to stress here is err on the side of setting your profit standard too high. And I mean like 200 or 300% above the median within your industry or business sector. That much. An outrageous amount, because you're going to be shocked that when you put the gas pedal down with this profit standard, and it will it will feel like a goal when you start out, but it will become a standard over time in an amazingly short period of time, because people will get fixated on that, they will move towards it, and you will be shocked at your results when you step on that gas pedal. And again, let me make this point. When you set a ultra high profit standard, and let's say you can't quite get there, it's much easier to back off that later on, right? There's this relief. Oh, finally, we're coming to our reason. But the CEO needs to have some backbone here, some courage, set at 2, 3, maybe even 400% higher than a typical organization in your industry or business sector. That is one of the biggest moves that you make, and where the greatest mistake is made for most companies. So there's number one, setting the profit standard, and set it high. 2, make sure your methods, your pay methodologies are legal. Get them vetted. It's very different in California than it is in Corn County, Iowa, or in Uniontown, New York, right? And so we need to check this out, make sure everything is legit and legal. And I will say this, sometimes there's no precedent for many of the compensation moves you might dream up or that you'll get from Multiview, because we've got a whole sack of them. There are many options. In that case, go for it, is my advice. And sometimes you'll have to go out to other similar businesses. So if you're doing a hospice, well, what has been done in home health? What has been done in private duty? What's been done in adult daycare? What's been done in various nursing home or skilled nursing facilities? What's been done in hospitals? Okay, or you can even go outside if you need to completely other business sectors. What has been done in manufacturing that has some legal precedent? What's been done in consulting? What's been done in retail or the restaurant business? So don't limit yourself just to your flavor of business. Point 3, make sure your chart of accounts is in great shape, because your chart of accounts, that is the underlying structure of your accounting system, the general ledger, where all your transactions, your debits and credits go, needs to be in good shape, because you're going to use this for the creation of a system that's easy to administer, because that's key. Because if it's hard to administer your system, you've got spreadsheet city, you've got people doing all kinds of crazy things to compute the compensation, and those things tend to break over time. It just takes a lot of work, and they go away more easily than elegant, simple systems. So you want to make sure to get the chart of accounts in good shape. In Multiview, we've already done that. We've put in hundreds and hundreds of charts of accounts for different industries and everything. But this is a critical structural move. Point 4, add performance pay general ledger accounts. Okay, these accounts are different than normal accounts, so you might have salary and hourly or wages, one account for one position. Let's just say it's nursing. Well, you would want to have an additional GL account set up for your performance pay. And the key distinction here is that these are based on savings. That is, if you beat your model or your standard, that these people receive this extra pay for beating this. So it doesn't hurt you at all. But if you allow those extra bonuses to be gobbled up into the normal GL account, yes, they may get bonused early in the year, large amounts, but later on, because they've been successful, they actually are penalized for their achievements. And it just gets harder and harder and harder to get their bonuses or their additional pay. So therefore, if you put them in these separate accounts, again, that are based on savings, that is beating your model, because if you can't be happy with attaining your model as a CEO after you set the profit standard, something's wrong. You're probably overly greedy. Much better to get a consistent result that's 200, 300, 400% than a typical organization in your business, right? That's such a high ideal, and people love that it's sustainable. But the point is, you're basing this on savings, and so you would construct special reports that would take these amounts out of the calculation of the bonuses or the extra pay. Point 5, you create dynamic data exchange reports that calculate net patient revenue or net revenue with ease, because everything we have, again, we have this dynamic feedback system. We don't use traditional budgets. Budgets are a horrid thing normally for the day-to-day management of an enterprise. Why? Because you want dynamic feedback. Now, they can be used for the performance pay element that I spoke of earlier, in that you have an overarching goal. Maybe it's to get to a certain size of business, to grow revenue to X amount. And in that case, sometimes a budget or something that's static works pretty well, but not for day-to-day, because you want to get rid of the volume variance, because every budget, traditional budget, has two different variances. It has the efficiency variance and it has the volume variance, and you can't tell one from the other in it, and that's what makes them so horrendous for managing an enterprise. But when you strip it away and you operate the organization based on percentages, that is this proportional amount of net revenue or net patient revenue in healthcare, well, suddenly you have this dynamic feedback, and people can think in terms of these percentages. And so then the question is, how much of the savings or the percentage do we get for achieving the results or meeting the or for achieving the results or beating the standard? And usually there's 3 reports that are critical. And normally we can manage a really large organization with relatively few reports. We need a comprehensive model report that shows every location. Even if we have 50 sites, every one of them has their line item. If we have an inpatient unit, whatever. But all our operational business units needs to be listed out. If we have all kinds of retail locations, well, they all would be listed out, store 1, store 2, store 3, and on down. The next report is the team or location report, and this would really show us all our various sites and locations, and this would be a horizontal report, because you want this report to be the wall of shame. You want this report to be the Hall of Fame or the Hall of Shame, where everybody looks at each other's performance and they either go, boy, Roy's doing a great job over here. I think I'll do what Roy's doing. Ooh, Diana's not doing so great. Don't want to follow her lead. But in our systems, we simplify the reporting because we don't have individual reports. Individual reports tend to create silos, and they decimate accountability. We want everybody lined up, bare naked, there you are, where everybody can see who's winning and who's losing, and obviously who's mediocre. Now, the third report is the indirect report. This is all the supporting functions. This is IT, HR, compliance, finance, of course, but all those areas that are supporting the front lines of whatever we're doing. And in this indirect report, everyone, again, is lined up. Everybody sees each other's numbers. It's a very fair way to do it because we're all playing on the same team, correct? So 3 reports: the comprehensive model report, the team location report with all our sites, and the third is the indirect report that just shows how the leader and the team in finance, HR, IT, all those, how they're doing according to the pre-established percentage or model amount. Point 6, design your main computer reports to support the pay system. In healthcare, it's EMR. This is our electronic medical records, where we put all the documentation regarding our patients, everything that's been done. In a manufacturing setting, these would be some of the different production and operational systems, but we want to design reports that we can easily get at the information we need to support the comp system. And let me just add this regarding the design of your computer systems. You want to sensitize them to detect any deviation from standards. Okay? And I've done this countless times with different organizations where, of course, being a programmer helps out because I think in terms of data fields and structures and all this, but just to intelligently design these reports where we can run those out, we can see who's winning, who's not winning, who gets the bonus, who doesn't, and you just want to make it as efficient and wired as you can. Point 7, determine who will process your payroll. And usually it's about 50-50. That is where they do it in-house, 50%, as well as farm it out to ADP or Paychex or any of these other groups. I tend to favor farming it out because that adds another level of review. They can catch things. For example, when laws and regulations change, they're usually more on top of it than an individual company, because they're dealing with many companies. And so I get some satisfaction from that. And let's face it, you're going to be doing most of the gathering of information anyway. So I think it's worth investing in the ADPs and what have you to really help and add this extra layer of security. Point 8, switch to semi-monthly pay periods. We know a lot of organizations, they pay every other week, which results in 26 pay periods, but this totally screws up your pay, especially for your managers. Why? It's because there's these cutoffs, and most accrual systems are not that great at doing this. And thus, in those 2 months where there's 3 payrolls, labor's just way outside, and of course people won't get bonused, especially your managers, which you have to keep delighted and satisfied. They're going to get hit twice a year. And you could say, well, yeah, but they're also highly compensated or more easily compensated for their efforts in the other 10 months. Well, that's true. But the smarter thing is to move away from 26 pay periods to 24. First of all, you have 2 less pay cycles to administer. So the cost of that activity goes down, of course, depending upon how you pay your folks that do that. But the second and probably more important thing is that it smooths out your financial statements, and it actually increases the comparability, along with not only making sure that everybody's being paid in a very similar way every month and they don't have these 2 big blips every year, but it also is just more consistent as far as when you review your data. That is, you take a look back And you don't have to say, oh, I know why that's so high. That had 3 payrolls. Ooh, forgot about that, You don't have to do that. It's just done automatically, and it's just easier. Point 9, move people to an exempt classification if possible. What we're really doing here is we're trying to get as many people away from hourly pay and as legally as possible. And of course, this has a state of being able to self-regulate, that is, being treated as a true professional. So if we're in a clinical realm, nurses, we're going to treat them as professionals. If we have social workers, we're going to treat them as professionals. Whereas if they're an hourly person, they're used to that widget, again, they fall into the work will expand to fill the time allotted and all those things that I've alluded to before. So you want to get them on a salary. You want to get as many people as you can on a salary for that modest base pay. Okay, so you just want to get people off of hourly. Point 10, establish your compensation methodologies. And this is probably one of the main reasons that you would hire Multiview, whether you're in healthcare or whether you're in some other business sector. Heck, I even was talking about it with the Green Berets that we hosted for some meetings a week or so ago. How are these soldiers going to get paid? So compensation has to be addressed, again, in any organization. So with this one, I'm just going to, because there's so many, and we've been doing this for so many years. I know for myself, it's like 35 years. I've been putting in systems, again, tons in healthcare, but textile mills, brokerage, financial firms, restaurants, agriculture, and the list goes on. And so this is one of the reasons that you would probably contract with us. But I do know this, there's a sequence for establishing these methodologies. The first thing you're going to want to do is settle your frontline pay for your frontline workers. In the clinical setting, this would be the clinician's pay. Kind of get that worked out, because this is going to really probably address 70% of your workforce. And so you can get that behind you. But the point is, you don't have to make it up. These methodologies have already been made. They've already been implemented, so we can see real-life results based on these methods. Okay, so you don't have to dream it up, spend all the time coming up with comp systems, because it's tough work. You're dealing with the realities of human behavior. And your screw-up factor is really high. Let me just say this, you'll hit potholes after potholes with seemingly innocent moves. But again, any move to take away accountability decreases your quality, decreases the results you're going to get. And to me, it's just intelligent to avoid such potholes. So, number 1, settle your frontline worker pay first. Next, move to your immediate managers. And of course, that's how, again, we won the Baldrige for our area. When Norman said, Andrew, we've got to bring laser focus to our clinical leaders, that is, our frontline managers, because I read, again, in Gallup that 70% of the development, the morale, the retention comes from the relationship of the immediate manager with the frontline worker. And so that's critical. We've seen people just work on that level in the org chart and just get mind-blowing results. Okay, so you settle frontline workers, 70% of the workforce, then move on to your immediate supervisors. And 3, then you start to settle your indirect people, setting their standards, how they will go about things. Again, finance, is it going to be 2.25% of net patient revenue? HR, you're at 1 or 1.25. But you have to come up with these proportional amounts of the pie that they were responsible for. And if they go even 1 cent above the standards, a portion, maybe 10% of the pay for that manager, maybe the whole team, is gone. Whereas if they come in under that set standard of cost really for their area, that they get to maybe get 50 or 30% of the savings, because this can be significant dollars. So providing that rich upside, but you can't even go 1 cent above the standard before you feel some pain, because you have to work with this team, because everyone knows you're holding up your end in this relationship of this integrated, coherent company that we're building. Turn the page. And then the fourth area you want to address is your executive management compensation. This would be the CEO, the COO, the CMO, whatever your titles are. Like I'm the CEO and Chief Teaching Officer, because everyone's taking their performance and behavioral cues from me, right? And so I use that title to manipulate myself or remind myself of that's my role, that everyone in the organization's watching me. So whatever titles that you have bestowed upon your leadership team, your executive management, you're going to have to pay these people. And normally you want methodologies that go in the ownership direction or have an ownership vibe, similar to shareholders, right? People that have equity stakes in organization. So at this point, you really take the net income for the areas that they were responsible for, because sometimes people in executive areas have multiple areas, right? Because your most capable people tend to end up with all kinds of areas. Just like in my case, I go down to become the number 2 at Palm Beach. And of course, with my financial background and my systems background, let's give Andrew finance. Let's give him IT. Oh, he's very good at compliance. Let's give him that. Ooh, Andrew's good at making money overall. Let's give him all the thrift shops. Ooh, Andrew could probably even run the inpatient unit. Ooh, Andrew could probably run the whole place when the CEO is out. And so your most capable people just get handed more and more because of their ability to do things. And of course, the negative aspect of this is that you can overload people and grind them down, wear them out with all the added responsibilities. But CEOs, let's face it, you're shouldering the whole thing. Every result, every number, your quality, your profits, you completely own. When an employee drops the screwdriver down the well and goes, oops, sorry about that, guess who's paying for it? You are. So you have to own every outcome of the business. So really, when you get down to it, handing people more responsibility is a good thing. We're probably growing them in their capabilities. But I just wanted to point that out as we go through this. So with your executive team, you want to give them some kind of proportional amount that comes from the profit or surplus or cost savings. Suppose they're over only indirect areas. These are not revenue generating areas. So therefore, it has to come from their ability to produce cost savings or beating the model. And this tends to be highly effective. Point 11, in creating your model, your comp system, assume that 100% of your employees will be receiving large amounts of individual pay. This is an important thing because you need to stress test your system, because there's so many bonus systems that CFOs and CFNOs put together knowing that most people are not going to hit their targets, right? And so they bank on this, but if everybody knocked it out of the park, it would bankrupt the organization. So we stress test the system saying 100% of our employees are going to do their job to the standards. Every one of them is going to meet their targets. And this will give you a great degree of comfort as you move along this compensation trail. Point 12, determine your method of objective monitoring. Now, what is objective monitoring? This is something that Multiview does. It's something that I was paid a large amount of money by this Wall Street entity to come up with a completely different organizational structure and system, of course, based on our past quantified results. And the reality is that most people, most managers are not going to effectively hold people accountable. That is the brute reality of the human condition. Your managers will not effectively hold people accountable. Now let that bake in. Yeah, they'll notice that something's off. They'll see a number. And what do? They delay. Because it's an uncomfortable proposition to have to address an employee and point out their defect or their flaws in their work, to take the corrective action. It's an unpleasant task at best. So what do people do? What's the human animal do? Delays. And what happens as we delay? Well, people keep making it prolongs the agony. People keep making the same mistakes. Quality and reputation are destroyed in the process. Value is diminished, all because people don't effectively address it. Now, we addressed aligning your different operational computer systems and sensitizing them to your standards in one of the prior steps. And this objective monitoring has a lot to do with this. And objective monitoring is where somebody in the organization is objective and is monitoring the operations and looks at everybody like a number, not as a person. Because if we have knowledge of that person, their family, their situation, their circumstances, well, people start to get squishy again and say, well, she's been having a tough week. This and this have just happened, and we soften the accountability. But with objective monitoring, it's being done for the manager. So they don't have to rifle through all this information, which thus makes their job easier. It's being done for them. And this is something that Multiview provides for companies. We started doing it many, many years ago when people had different legacy systems. And David and I, again, with our respective system backgrounds, went in and made these applications that extracted all this information, dissimilar information. Because a lot of times, so many operational systems, things are just scattered, and you have to run 50 reports to get at what you need to complete a payroll or do the evaluation of the results. No, we go in and extract exactly the data elements that are needed. We bring them back in a very elegant way where it's very easy to determine people's performance. And this is kind of a Multiview secret weapon that we've been doing for many, many years. And that is one of the absolute unique aspects, because nobody in the world does it like we do it, and as effectively, nor has the experience. Because this is not something you can do by just saying, hey, this sounds like a great thing to do, and you try to put it in. There are so many technicalities involved. Again, you want to avoid the potholes when you're putting in a comp system. Well, you want to avoid the potholes when putting in an objective monitoring system too, because it's a pretty sensitive thing. So objective monitoring is a big thing, and you can contact us. Just go on the website or phone us or email us, and we can discuss and explore your options. Point 13, create accountability contracts. This is where we have all employees, everyone in the workforce, sign a written accountability contract. These explain the standards of the position. They're uniform. They say that your pay can and will be changed over time as we adapt to the realities of the business world or whatever we're trying to achieve. It says that I have been adequately trained in the standards, that I'm not being coerced to do this. I'm not under any type of stress to sign this contract. I'm not under duress. I'm doing this willfully. And of course, all this helps you in the legal category. It's very good in California especially. Also good in states like New York, but it's good regardless. That people are committing to a document that really spells out the relationship between the employee and the employer. That is clear. And that if any time I'm uncertain or I'm confused about the standards, that I am to immediately go to my immediate supervisor and get it resolved.
We hope you are having the best day of your life. If you need something further, just visit one of the Multiview Incorporated websites or contact us through social media. Smoke signals, carrier pigeons, telepathy have not proven reliable. All calls are answered within 3 rings by a competent, real person. Thank you for listening.